Well, like it was just said, the country is about to be 247 years old. Think back then, in the colonies getting together, their people to form the Declaration of Independence, how much fear there must have been at the time. There was so much uncertainty in trying to form a new nation. Fast forward to today, we still have a lot of fear. What in this world scares you the most? What do you fear most about our society? There's much fear happening right now. A lot of it is fear of further division among people. Racism, bigotry, politics. It's natural to experience fear. Fear, is a natural emotion that warns us of possible danger. We feel it all from time to time. But letting fear grip us and influence our lives on a regular basis can rob us of our joy and make us forget to be grateful for what is good in our lives. Fear, when we leave it unchecked, could be a gateway to judging others, to reacting instead of responding, to even have vitriol or even hatred. The remedy for our fear is love. That sounds pretty obvious, but really, let's dig a little deeper with that. I know we're all familiar with 1 Corinthians chapter 13, which some dubbed the love chapter. There's a reason why Paul wrote it. There was a lot going on in the city of Corinth at the time. As I describe Corinth, let's see how many similarities we have between that and Shreveport or other major cities. Corinth was a great commercial city in southern Greece. All traffic going north and south passed through Corinth, and much of the east and west traffic did as well. Corinth had many nicknames, such as the Vanity Fair of the ancient world, the Bridge of Greece, or the Lounge of Greece. It was home to what's called the Isthmian Games, which is a days-long festival of athletic competition, similar to the Olympics. In fact, the Isthmian Games were second in prestige only to the Olympics. It was a rich and populous city. How many of y'all have read Jason and the Argonauts? I mean, you're familiar with it at least. Legend has it that the giant Argo ship that Jason sailed on when he was in search for the Golden Fleece, that it was built in Corinth. How do issues in Corinth compare to what we face today? Corinth, despite all its great attributes, also had its issues. It was full of drunken and immoral debauchery. On the hill of the Acropolis stood a temple of Aphrodite, where 1,000 sacred prostitutes presided. And every evening they would come down from the hill to ply their trade. There are many traders who came through Corinth, brought their own vices as well. Corinth became known not just for wealth and luxury, but also for filth. Now, the early church in Corinth had its issues. A lot of these tradesmen and sailors ended up settling down in Corinth and became some early members of the church. And a lot of these people came from a pagan background. And the church was not united. It had several divisions among itself. It was divided into various factions, and each was consumed too much with their own wisdom. Some bragged about how much knowledge they had of the scriptures. Some boasted about their gifts of speech and what great speakers they were. They even debated and argued on who had more faith, who bragged about giving more to charity. They even discussed on who was going to be the biggest martyr among them. They were focused on their pride, and they were focused on their fear of the influence of the other factions within the church having on everybody else. They were not focused on the sheer grace of God, and they most certainly were lacking love in their ministry. Now, we have so many issues going on today. Yes, we got the big ones. We got drugs. We got violence. We got sex, sex in mass media, everywhere. But we also have division among the population. We've got the economics, politics, views on society issues. Now, for better or worse, there are some everlasting changes occurring in our society. History shows that historians and sociology experts will tell you that every 30 to 40 years, there's always a slight paradigm shift in approaches to culture, politics, organized religion. But right now, we're not in the middle of a paradigm shift. We're kind of sit in a constant state of fear. So what do we need to do in the meantime? We need endurance. And we need to show grace. Endurance and grace require love. It's really that simple. I didn't say it was easy, but it is simple. Paul tells us that love is above all other gifts when it comes to serving our Lord and our fellow neighbor. From 1 Corinthians chapter 13. If I could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, but didn't love others, I would only be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy, and if I understood all of God's secret plans, and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that I could move mountains, but didn't love others, I would be nothing. If I gave everything I have to the poor, and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it. But if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. Prophecy and speaking in unknown languages and special knowledge will become useless, but love will last forever. Now, our knowledge is partial and incomplete, but even the gift of prophecy reveals only part of the whole picture. But when the time of perfection comes, these partial things will become useless. When I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. Now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror, but then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know now is partial and incomplete, but then I will know everything completely, just as God now knows me completely. 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Now, the first 3 verses, Paul states, one may have the gifts to speak different languages, to prophecy or preach. But without love, these gifts serve no purpose than to serve themselves. So to further understand why love is the solution, let's dig deeper into the 15 characteristics of love that Paul describes. The first 2, love is patient, love is kind. How is this shown? When man is slow to anger, however wrong we believe someone to be, however disparaging or hurtful, we must exercise the same patience that God exercises with us. In my early 20s, when I was going to school at LSUS, I also worked part-time at Old Navy. And I had come home from work one time complaining to Dad about an extremely rude customer I had to deal with. I was working in the fitting room, and this particular customer was being belligerent over having to wait in line at the dressing room during a busy day. Finally, after continuously running her mouth, I had lost my cool with the customer and snapped at her. She cried. I got reprimanded by my manager. And when I told my dad what had happened when I come home, he said, well, son, I know sometimes people can be unreasonable, but you just have to turn the other cheek. I said, but Dad, I only have 2 cheeks. And he said, well, son, when you act like the south end of a northbound mule, you really have 4 cheeks. North, south, you get it? Okay. The third and fourth traits. Love is not jealous. Love is not boastful. Look, God created all of us differently. He blessed some of us academically. He created some of us with natural athletic ability. God's made some of us with great problem-solving skills. God created some of us good-looking, and then he made the rest of you. If you appreciated that joke, you're welcome. If you didn't, I stole that from another pastor in town. Sometimes nice guys do finish last, though. Sometimes we don't get what we deserve, no matter how much we work. Sometimes other people that we feel less deserving seem to always get the breaks. But when we exhibit biblical love, we do not act jealous or envious of such people. Likewise, those of us who have been fortunate enough and have great fortune, experiences, or outcomes in our endeavors should remember to be humble in our state, because it's been shown that our fortunes can flip-flop at any time for any reason. Love is not proud. Love is not rude. Like not being boastful, this reminds us to remain humble and not put ourselves above others. The great Emperor Napoleon, at the height of his power, always advocated for the sanctity of the home and for public worship for others. But speaking about himself, he said, I am not like other men. The rules of morality do not apply to me. Well, we know what eventually became of him at the end. Speaking about love not being proud, how many relationships and marriages have deteriorated because one or both spouses dug their heels in and refused to communicate and compromise in the face of conflict? How many friendships have been lost? How many churches have disbanded or closed? What is Paul saying to the church in Corinth? What is Paul saying to us? Number 7, love does not insist on its own way. Multiple ways to interpret this. Selfishness, stubbornness, being inconsiderate of others' feelings or viewpoints. The Bible scholar William Barclay helps illustrate this point by declaring there are 2 types of people in the world: those who insist on their privileges and those who remember their responsibilities. Now, we are a functioning society, so it appears at least some of us usually remember our responsibilities. But we struggle to be a harmonious society. And part of that can easily be attributed to us dwelling on what privileges we have and what privileges we think we should have. When this happens, we drift away from gratitude. When this happens, we drift away from Christian love. When this happens, we open ourselves and those around us to resentment and eventually hate. Love is not irritable. We all get irritated with things from time to time. Some of us even have short fuses and can lose our temper rather easily. Guilty. Me. Some of y'all have experienced that with me. Apologies. Now, while anger and irritability in themselves are just plain human emotions, and they're not inherently right or wrong, it is how we handle and display those emotions that make them right or wrong. When we lose our temper at those who refuse to see our side of the conversation, or at those who post something on social media that we fundamentally disagree with, do we honestly believe we're going to change their minds by simply lashing out? Or are we simply just adding more fuel to a divisive fire? In about a year, we're going to have another election season upon us. Social media will once again become a battleground of right-wing and left-wing ideologies, each posting propaganda in a futile, I have that underlined in my notes, futile underlined, futile attempt to convince the other side to change their vote. Now, it is our right and our privilege as Americans to disagree with each other over politics and various issues that affect our community. However, it is our responsibility to disagree in a civil and, yes, loving way. I'm going to say that again. It is our responsibility as Christians to disagree in a civil and loving way. Love keeps no record of being wronged. This is the old adage of forgive but do not forget. It's natural for us to remember times of being hurt by others, whether it occurred recently or a long time ago. Many of us still carry some trauma on action carried out against us, or some terribly hurtful words spoken to us by somebody else. While we do not forget, we can still forgive. And it's not for the other person's benefit, it's for our own. Because if we can forgive and show love and refuse to give in to resentment, we're not going to turn around and use our hurt and take it out on others. This is a pattern often carried out in this world that many of y'all are familiar with. This scenario. Someone from Group A has really said or done something to hurt me. Later on down the road, I'm going to be proactive, and I'm going to be hostile towards people in Group B because they have many of the same attributes as people in Group A. That sound familiar to anybody? Now, every one of us has been a part of Group B. But how many of us have also been a member of Group A? How many of us have also been the one hurt by Group A and took it out on Group B? We are tasked by Christ to break this pattern by forgiving and to seek forgiveness from those who we may have wronged. Love does not rejoice about injustice. Love rejoices truth. It's one of the strange traits of human nature that many of us take enjoyment of the news of the misfortune of others than the news of good fortune. Hollywood gossip, of course, capitalizes on this, but so does mainstream media. They do this for the purpose of generating more revenue for themselves. I know some of us here in this church cling to the words spoken on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, NPR, name your news site. It doesn't matter. We cling to those words as if they're gospel, when in fact they're all slanted. Every one of them has a slant to stir up masses and generate more ratings and revenue for themselves. Christian love excludes this human malice and finds no pleasure in others' misfortunes. Another quirk of our human nature is that we sometimes do not want the truth revealed, especially when it involves our own misfortunes, or even worse, our own mistakes or sins. As difficult it is, Christian love has nothing to conceal and revels in the truth. Love never gives up. Love never loses faith. Love always hopes. Love always endures through every circumstance. This is pretty self-explanatory. Love is limitless. We as mere mortals have a limited capacity to think straight, a limited capacity to exert ourselves physically, a limited capacity to listen. I'm almost done. Bear with me. But we all have the capacity to love forever. We do. And this has already been shown for us. Jesus Christ, God in human form, exemplified this on the cross when he was crucified and died for us. Yeah, these are indeed challenging times, and we have more challenging times ahead. But with our faith, there is light at the end of this tunnel, especially if that light is shown through our love. For some final words, let's remember Paul's words at the end of 1 Corinthians 13. 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. And let us not forget Jesus' words in Matthew 22, verses 37 through 39. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. It's that simple. Maybe not easy, but it is simple. Love the Lord and love others. Imagine our society and imagine our world if we were to actually follow these words. Amen.